Hey, there's a story about a woman in 2 Kings 4. And this woman, they call her the Shunammite woman, and she had made provisions for the prophet Elisha. She and her husband had a guest room, and Elisha stayed in that guest room when he was in town. Well, they wanted to bless the woman. She didn't have any children. So Elisha prophesied that she would have a child, and she did. Well, several years later, the boy died, and she went to Elisha and asked Elisha to help her. And Elisha prayed over this boy, and the boy came back to life, which is an amazing miracle. But listen, her story doesn't end there. And I love that this woman shows up again in 2 Kings 8. And what happens is this. Elisha went to the woman and told her there was going to be a famine and that she needed to get out of town in order to live, right? So she leaves. She leaves her home, her property, their farm, everything. And she goes somewhere else and lives among people that were not her people so that she can survive. And she had stayed there for 7 years, which is a long time, right? Well, when she returns home after the famine is over, she discovers that someone has basically squatted on her property, right? They've taken over her house, her land, her farm, and so she has nothing now. And I think sometimes we find ourselves in situations that maybe we can compare to that, where something that we believed was ours, whether it physically was ours or it was a dream in our heart, and now it looks impossible for us to ever have that thing. And we feel like maybe it's hopeless, but I want you to see what God did for this woman, okay? So I'm going to read a little bit of the Bible to you. It's in 2 Kings 8. I'm going to start in verse 4. It says, "The king had been speaking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, 'Tell me all the great things Elisha has done.'" So this is Elisha's servant, Gehazi, and he has been there with Elisha when many of these miracles have taken place, right? And he's talking to the king. Somehow he and the king, I don't know, they're friends, they're hanging out, they're having a conversation. And the king says to him, "Man, it must be really cool, right, to be traveling with Elisha. Tell me some of these miracles that you've seen." So then it says, while he was telling the king how Elisha restored the dead son to life, the woman whose son he had restored to life came to appeal to the king for her house and field. So she had been on her way to see the king to say, "Hey, I was gone for 7 years during the famine and somebody took over my property and my home, and I would really like to have it back," right? So Gehazi said, "My lord the king, this is the woman. This is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life." And when the king asked the woman, she told him the story. So the king appointed a court official for her, saying, "Restore all that was hers, along with all the income from the field from the day she left the country until now." Listen, God sees you. He sees the situation that you're in. He loves you. And when you go to him and ask him for help, this is the kind of thing that he does. God not only restored this woman's property and home to her, but he told them, give her every cent that was profited from her property for the 7 years that she was gone. God is a restorer. He is a protector and a restorer. He protected her so that she didn't have to live through the famine. And then he restored to her everything that appeared to be lost. When we put our hope and our trust in God, we cannot go wrong.